Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and today we have a Dragonflight Season 4 dungeon post, so let's dig in. So this post is called Dragonflight Season 4 Dungeon Changes Ahead. Right off the bat, we can see Algathar Academy Bird Boss up here, which they basically confirm further down will be in the season. Dragonflight Season 4 brings with it a variety of changes, including new adjustments to dungeons, their progression, and rewards. In the player feedback loop, as part of ongoing development in Dragonflight, the development team identified 3 issues to address based on community feedback regarding how the dungeon system as it is. Heroic dungeons are barely distinct from normal dungeons at maximum level, and that distinction mostly only matters during a few days after players first reach max level. Yeah, I mean, depending on the type of player you are, that distinction never matters. For, I would say, even players that achieve AOTC mid to late into a patch, probably, you will be doing heroic dungeons rather than normal dungeons very early on and not feeling, especially like there's been a step up in difficulty there. And then for, players in like my guild, heroic and normal dungeons are basically the same thing, and we ignore basically both of them and just do Mythic Zeros as soon as we hit max level. We do one of each Mythic Zero on our main and probably our alt as well, and then heroic and normal dungeons are pretty much irrelevant. Mythic Zero dungeons rapidly lose relevance a few weeks into an expansion once the M+ season starts, with occasional exceptions for the weekly event quest. That's very true as well for, at least again for me and my guild, we do M0 swoops until M+ comes out, and then from that point on, there's basically no reason to ever do M0 instead of M+. I don't think that's necessarily something they're looking to change, but I think they want to make that something that is not true for as many people as it's currently true for, right? They would like there to be a portion of the player base maybe that is currently doing mid to low level keys that it's just like, yeah, we'll just do M0s for a while. Because M0s have an appeal that M+ doesn't have, which is that they're untimed, so they're much more like forgiving, they're much less stressful. And so if you amp the difficulty and rewards of M0 a little bit, and you get more of the player base to be, comfortable doing that as their content, then you get maybe some people who would kind of hate the timed element of M+, not needing to interact with it. The only truly endgame dungeon mode, M+, currently revolves around a timer. Yeah, okay, so that's what I was basically just saying. This means that other than new mega dungeons, there isn't really a place for endgame players who enjoy a more methodical dungeon pacing and gameplay, which a lot of people ask for this. I mean, it's one of the most commonly seen things in M+ threads. I personally think that the timer is like pivotal to M+ being what it is, but I do think it would be good if players who hated the timer would also have, some high-level dungeon stuff that they could do that they would find fun. So let's see what they've got to do with that. Given the combination of 2 underutilized difficulties, a gap in meeting player demand, we're restructuring dungeon difficulty and rewards in Season 4. Heroic difficulty and rewards will move up to roughly the current level of M0. These dungeons will remain available to queue into via Group Finder, though the item level requirement will also go up. M0 will move up to the equivalent of current M+8 or +10. This is hand wavy. Numerically, it's close to M10, but not having a timer at all or affixes really offsets that quite a bit. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge reduction in, you can't fail, right? You can only fail if you can't kill a boss, right? Like if you get brick walled or if people leave or whatever, which is obviously not true of timed keys. The existing M+ system will pick up where that leaves off, such that a +5 in Season 4 is roughly equivalent in difficulty, rewards, and M+ rating awarded to 15 today. And that's not just saying, like, hey, the difficulty's going up, but your eye level's going up, so it equalizes. It's saying, like, hey, if your eye level goes up by however many eye levels are between Season 3 and Season 4, this is still true, right? Like, you will still find a +5 to be feeling like a +15 does right now. So here's a visualization of the changes. The light blue circles represent where new affixes appear, which is going to be going from 2s, 7s, and 14s in the current world to 2s, 5s, and 10s in the new one. And the basic idea is that, so a few things we can pull from this, right? First of all, affixes are higher up the difficulty curve, even though, obviously they're lower in numbers. Those numbers are representing much harder content. And you don't actually get your third affix until what is basically supposed to be the equivalent of a +20, which is good. The less people have to deal with affixes, the better with the state of current affixes. Hopefully that's something that changes at some point in the future. But as of right now, removing affixes from as many players as possible will improve the game for those players, which is good. Unfortunately for me, I will be playing keys, at and above this level where that third affix gets added, so that doesn't help me, but that's a nice little change there. And then, okay, so they've addressed a little bit of this revolving around a timer thing by basically, anybody who was playing in this range here now doesn't have a timer, right? This was timed and is now untimed. But I think what a lot of people were really looking for was they were looking for like a parallel progression track where you could do, like maybe Mythic 0 dungeons are actually above the difficulty of some of the M plus dungeons, right? But then they're untimed, rather than being like the base, rather than just kind of squishing up and pushing the M plus higher up. But still having it be that past a certain point you have to go timed to do stuff. I feel like there were, you could see this with Dawn of the Infinite as well, because when Dawn of the Infinite came out back in 10.1.5, it was actually kind of harder than, it was probably about a plus 10 or a plus 15 level of difficulty, but it was untimed, and it had like this hard mode that you could try and do. You could do a deathless run, you could do those kind of things. And I think that sort of niche for the mega dungeons has worked out really well. There's been a lot of players who've really enjoyed having something like that, and I do think that Blizzard have identified that's something that people want, but I don't really think that this fixes that. I think the way that you fix that is you actually do come up with something, parallel to the timed difficulties that is untimed. But so I mean, basically they've just kind of squished the M plus keys to a higher difficulty level, and I do think it makes sense to put, like normal and heroic having some meaning, and Mythic 0 having some meaning, having some extra difficulty, that's probably good too. No timer like the present. Season 4 changes will apply to all 8 of the Dragonflight dungeons, which this is it's not a hard confirm, but it pretty much confirms that the 8 Dragonflight dungeons will be the M plus season dungeons, right? Because, one of the changes they're talking about here is Mythic Plus, and so if these dungeons have a Mythic Plus mode, then they've got to be in the season, right? So as of right now, people's best guess, I think, based off of this post, is going to be the 8 Dragonflight dungeons that were split between Season 1 and Season 2 will be the Season 4 dungeons, which I think is probably pretty good. It means that Rise and Fall will only have 1 season, whereas all the other Dragonflight dungeons will have had 2. But, Rise and Fall, I think those dungeons are kind of fun, but man, every single time I do those dungeons, I find myself running into a wall waiting for it to go down, and every time I'm doing that in a dungeon, I'm just hating it. So I'm, good riddance. Like, next time, if they tried as well. They took like 3 minutes of RP between those dungeons and they cut it out, but you just have to cut out all of it. It sucks so much to be standing there running against a wall, watching your timer tick down, waiting for, the wall to open so you can fight the boss. So that's my one big thing for Rise and Fall is like, if there's even 1 second of RP that you're like waiting for that you have no agency during, like there's a couple of different types of RP, right? Like there's RP while Keeper Tier is activating, and at least that's somewhat interesting because it's like, okay, we can be doing trash during this, right? We can activate the boss and then we can grab some trash during this RP, and like there's a way to optimize that. But when you're just waiting for the wall to go down for Chronoloord Deus at the end, like you're literally just looking at your timer and you're like, okay, like this feels bad, this sucks. And anytime that's the feeling, I think they shouldn't do that. So as part of these adjustments, we have a few goals in mind. Recalibrate core difficulties to align with seasonal player experience and progression. Serve the community who enjoys dungeon content but feels Mythic Plus content isn't for them due to pressures of taking part. And create a better environment in Mythic dungeons to prepare more players to take part in M+. I think these are 2 really good goals, right? Like there's a lot of people who don't do M+, some of whom would enjoy it and should be given the help they need to get into it, and some of whom won't enjoy it and should be given fun things to do that aren't M+. One of the most notable changes players can look forward to is the removal of timer. Is the removal of timer for Mythic Keystone dungeons for what are currently 0 and 10. Players can run through these dungeons at their own pace without the need to watch the clock while still honing their skills. Okay, the removal of timer for Mythic Keystones for what are currently 0 and 10. What does that mean? I mean, 0 and 10, does that just mean that, like, oh, yeah, if you're in this range, that's now M0s, which are untimed? Yeah, it must be, right? Like, a +2 is still timed here under this. Okay. I thought this was like a bigger change. It's like, and actually some of these are going to be untimed as well, but no, that's I think that's not what this means. Here's a look at changes for each difficulty. Normal, unchanged. Heroic, higher stuff, like higher difficulty, but not mythic mechanics, and remains queuable, but higher eye level required to queue. Mythic, the tuning is increasing, no timers, affixes, limitations on changing specs or talents. The goal is to create a mega dungeon-like difficulty for this experience. This difficulty should present a meaningful challenge and provide commensurate rewards without the pressures of the current M+ system. Yeah, I mean, great. I think that's good. And it's still on a weekly lockout, so, you know, a lot of words for just saying, yeah, the tuning has gone up, right? And then M+, the M+ system will have rewards up to level 10, with +2 starting from what would regularly be a +11 in the current M+ system. A +5 should be as hard as a +15, and a +10 should be as hard as a +20. Affixes would slot in at +2, +5, and +10. +2 is fortified and tyrannical, +5 entangling and corporeal, etc. +10 bursting, bolstering, etc. There's a tragic little. Anytime they type the word bolstering, that means it's probably not getting removed, which means that the season is going to again be worse than it could be. But it was a faint hope, but it's always a hope for me every season that they will remove bolstering and dungeons will be more fun. I guess it's maybe still possible, but it's pretty unlikely given that they've typed this. Dungeon ratings should be equivalent to what they represent in the current system. Dungeon ratings. Okay, so like you should get the same amount of score for a +10 as you currently do for a +20, which means they can use the same cutoffs for Keystone Master, Keystone Hero, and stuff. Good. There should be a smaller range of Keystone levels to find groups for, and more meaningful progression between each level. Now that's something that, first of all, the smaller range of Keystones to find groups for, that's just almost certainly going to be true, right? More meaningful progression between each level. I've looked at the math here, and I don't actually think that will be like true. You know, if you look at how they're spaced in this graph, for instance, it's not like they're spaced further apart, meaning that a jump between two levels is higher, nor is that even really mathematically possible, given the way that the exponential scaling works on this. You know, if you want to go from a +2 up to from a +11 to a +20, you're going up by 9 keystone levels, right? And if you want to go from a +2 to a +10, you're going up by 9 keystone levels. So they're saying that, you know, a +11 is equivalent to a +2, and a +20 is going to be equivalent to a +10. So how are those things true? And then there's the same number of steps between those levels. Like, if that's true, then there must just be the same difficulty increase between each level, right? It's not like that slope is going up. So I don't know how there would be more meaningful progression between each level, I guess with the exception of the fact that, you know, there are more steps here where affixes are added along this, shortened progression system. So maybe that's the argument they're making. But I was thinking initially here, when I was kind of first doing this math, was that like, oh, the jump between each key level is going to be higher. But I actually don't think it, like, again, mathematically, I just don't think that's possible given these things. If we assume that this is true here, which I don't see why it wouldn't be, then I think this has to be kind of wrong. But maybe I'm missing something, or maybe they just do mean that affixes are being added more frequently in this band, right? Obviously, there's 3 affixes added in this band, whereas only 1 in this band before. To the victor go the spoils. It's important to note the basic structure of dungeon rewards is not changing significantly, so what you would have earned for completing an M0 will be earnable in Heroic instead. Here's a basic rundown of what you can expect. So, love these charts that give you the whole upgrade track name, and then also the eye level in each season, and also where you're going to get it from. So normal is the same, it's Explorer 3 out of 8. Heroic has gone to Adventurer 4 out of 8 instead of 1 out of 8. Not actually a huge difference. If it went up to the Veteran track, that would maybe be relevant. And Great Vault is Veteran track as well, still, just like before from Heroic Dungeons. M0 End of Dungeon has gone from Adventurer 4 out of 8 to Champion 1 out of 8, which is normal raid eye level, so that's definitely quite big. And M0 Great Vault has actually gone up to the Hero track as well, which is, that's a heroic raid level. So if you're on a character that an alt that you kind of want to chill on, you don't feel comfortable doing M plus in, right? You don't like the pressure of M plus, but you do some M0s on it, you're actually going to get pretty justly rewarded, right? You're going to get champion and hero track gear, right? Champion track from the dungeons, hero track from the vault, which should let that character get some pretty good gear in pretty reasonable amount of time, which I think is pretty good. Obviously, M0 is going to be a lot harder than it used to be, but it is still untimed. It's a lot more chill, so that might well be something that more people will engage with because of the way that reward structure works. And then you can just see that, like, basically all the numbers have just gone up by 10 along the reward track here. So if you want to get into Myth track gear, you're going to need to do an 8 instead of an 18. If you want best possible Great Vault gear, you're going to need a 10 instead of a plus 20. And best possible end of dungeon comes from a 9 and up instead of a 19 and up. So, I mean, we're looking at pretty close to the same numbers here, right? Like, there's a few spots where it's changed a little bit to accommodate the fact that they're squishing out a bunch of these initial numbers, but it's pretty much the same idea, except minus 10 on the key level. Crest and Flightstone rewards are changing to match the same difficulty with only some minor adjustments. Flightstones will match the challenging M plus from previous seasons, so, again, as you expect, a plus 10 will give you the Flightstones that a plus 20 used to, and the rewards will continue to match difficulty even if what we're calling those difficulties changes. Bonus Flightstone awards for increasing any party member's M plus score remains unchanged. Good, I think that's a good system. Whelpling's Crests are no longer available from M+, as those difficulties no longer exist. You can collect Whelpling's Crest from any outdoor sources. Yeah, I don't know this for sure, because obviously I'm not one of the players that is in the Whelplings, tier, but I at least have found that there's an abundance of them available from all the Outdoor World stuff, and of course you can get them from LFR and stuff too. Players learn Drake's Crest from completing an M0, as there's no timer to beat. You'll learn 10 from completing an M0. Sad to see there's not any changes to the number of other crests you earn from the timed runs as well. That's another thing I've been hoping they would change, is I was hoping they would buff the amount of crests that you would get from timing, and especially depleting keys, because I do think one of the things that kind of makes M plus have a barrier to entry is that knowledge that, like, hey, if we deplete this, like, we're going to lose a lot of crests. We're going to lose more than half of the crests that we would have earned, which I always felt has been too harsh. And then the other thing I'd like to see is, just late in the season, I wish they would buff the crests for M+, so that alts didn't have quite as long of a road ahead of them when you created them. So Worm's Crest and Aspect Crest, though, will be available in the same quantities and at the same key levels effectively as right now. We believe these changes provide new opportunities for players to experience Mythic and Mythic Plus dungeons while providing additional challenges for endgame players in the future. We look forward to your feedback, and we'll see you in the dungeons when Season 4 goes live in the future. So this is all, I don't know, I would describe this as probably pretty low impact for most players, but for the players specifically that play in this band that are interested in untimed content, it's huge. Like, that's great for them. If you're kind of any player anywhere else on this track, I don't think this is going to change too much for you. Specifically, I would dispute the idea that more meaningful progression is going to come between each keystone level, and that additional challenges for endgame players will exist as a result of this. But I think that, this is probably a good squish to be done. And yeah, delete bolstering. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know if there's any, insights I've missed from reading this. Let me know if you're the type of player that is excited, for instance, about harder M0s. I think that is probably the biggest change in here, is harder M0s. So if that's something that you're interested in, say so in the comments. And hopefully a lot of people are. I think that's probably just a purely good change. If you're the kind of player who's like, I liked M0s where it was, and you don't like them moving here, say that as well and say why. Should be interesting. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.